Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith. Today, March 28th, 2018, DJI have announced the availability and launch of their Payload SDK. This is important news for the drone industry since it now means that different sensors, regardless of manufacturer, can now integrate directly into DJI drone platforms as if they were native. Previously, sensor manufacturers had to essentially bolt their products directly onto the drone, meaning that the sensor itself wasn't even able to communicate and access critical metadata from the flight like altitude, heading, or GPS location, and couldn't even be controlled by the drone's software. OEMs are still literally embedding an entire secondary autopilot into sensors that they make because of this. So now, sensor OEMs can ditch the extra added weight of the redundant components and just plug into the DJI drone and piggyback directly off of that drone's existing flight controller and IMU. So operators can now even control the third-party sensor directly from DJI's own app. Of course, this is all tailored to and made possible by DJI's large projected 70+% holding of market share, but that's not a novel situation these days, and by and large, DJI continues to make the most user-friendly, easiest to adopt drones on the market. On this exclusive interview, you'll hear directly from DJI and two of their sensor partners, FLIR and SLANTRANGE, who both have adopted the new Payload SDK and integrated their own products with it. So let's go back now and join the conversation. Hey everybody, Ian Smith here, and welcome to this exclusive Commercial Drones FM episode covering DJI's new launch of their Payload SDK. So this is a very unique episode since it's the first where we actually have three guests in the room, all with their own mics. So really excited about this. Those guests are Jan Gasparich. Did I pronounce that right?
You did?
I did. Thank you. Okay. So he's the head of enterprise partnerships at DJI. We've got Mike Ritter. He is the CEO of SLANTRANGE out of San Diego, California. And then we've got Randall Warness, who's the global SUAS segment leader for FLIR. So welcome to Commercial Drones FM, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. So first off, this is a very special day. PSDK launch is what we're going to be referring to this as probably, but it means Payload SDK. So today, DJI, I want to start off with you, Jan, from DJI. Today, you announced your Payload SDK, but also an exclusive sensor along with your partner FLIR. So can you tell us a little bit about the Payload SDK and also this sensor with FLIR, just a kind of brief overview to prime everyone in the audience on what we're going to chat about today?
Sure, absolutely. So thanks so much for organizing this, Ian, and having us all here on the podcast. Maybe it would be worthwhile to start with just a little bit of background in terms of where DJI is in terms of the enterprise industry. So, over the last 2 years, between 2016 and 2017, we've seen about 43% growth in just commercial UAV adoption if we're looking at the Part 107 growth figures, right, for how many commercial pilots are being registered. And we really expect that to continue to grow well into 2018 and beyond, right? Now, as of October last year, there's something around 80,000 Part 107 pilots out in the field, right? That's a crazy number.
That is. It's huge.
Yeah, and so today, this is now middle of March, it's probably crossed well over 100,000. So without a doubt, the commercial drones industry is absolutely booming. There's a ton of opportunity here. So for DJI, when we're looking for different areas that we're going to grow into, enterprise is obviously a key area of focus for us. But we're also very cognizant that the same approach that's made us successful in the consumer space may not be necessarily appropriate also for the enterprise space, right? So we're always thinking about different things that we need to do in order to accelerate ourselves and, of course, accelerate the whole industry, right? And there's probably three key pillars for how we think about this. So first is when we're looking at commercial drones, we really have to think about it. Stop moving from from just a product mindset to a solutions mindset, right? And you see that manifest on the DJI side from things like our PCGS Pro, just adding on software solutions that help people get the most out of our products, but also solutions like Flight Hub, right? Mm-hmm. So we're always looking at different things that we can add on to our products to make them grow. But at the same time, we're also cognizant that this is not something that we can just do ourselves, right? And the partnership with FLIR is a key example of that. We need partnerships that add value, that bring unique industry expertise, and again, act as an accelerator and help the whole industry grow.
Awesome.
And the third piece would be really focusing on our platforms. So we invest a lot in creating platforms that people can build solutions around. And today, especially with the M200 series, we're really starting to think of the M200 series as the pinnacle of drones being a platform for people to build solutions and products around, right? Mm-hmm. Now, Payload SDK fits into this as another, essentially as another accelerator. So in the past, we've had mobile SDK and onboard SDK if you wanted to build autonomous solutions. But if you wanted to integrate your own sensor, there's a lot of work that you had to take on. And in a nutshell, Payload SDK essentially gives you an interface that allows you to build in sensors into our platforms in a much more simple way.
Excellent. And what about this, the FLIR sensor? So this one's called the XT2. So the ZenMuse XT2. So previously, the audience probably knows that FLIR launched the XT. I'm not sure when it was. It feels like it's been
December 2015.
December 2015. Yeah. So it's been, well, over 2 years.
Over 2 years.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, tell us maybe Randall, actually, maybe you can tell us just a little bit about the XT2. What's different than the XT, the original version, and what makes this sensor special? Sure.
So taking feedback that we got from the industry over the last 2.5 years, putting the XT in the air, we found that there was this there was areas of efficiencies that we could make up for. And one of those is having to land the drone to change out cameras from thermal to visible. So we decided that it would be a good idea to put thermal and visible in the same payload so that you could operate both simultaneously. You could have picture-in-picture swapping back and forth, or you could have a blended image, which is called MSX technology. It's multispectral blending technology. And that allows you to see things that don't necessarily have a thermal signature, like words or placards in different inspection scenarios.
That must have been what I saw on the on one of the launch videos. There was an example. It looked a little bit like thermal, but it had like these kind of funky edges. So it's, I guess that's what what did you call it? Multispectral blending?
Multispectral blending, MSX technology. And this is a FLIR proprietary technology. It's patented. And basically it takes those edges that you would see in the RGB world and it embosses that over the thermal image so that it gives you more detail and context within the image.
Cool. And so Mike, I want to get to you. Mike Ritter, CEO of SLANTRANGE. So Jan had mentioned that previously, prior to this Payload SDK launch that's happening today, it was a challenge for sensor manufacturers, OEMs, to actually integrate their products onto DJI drones. So I think nobody really kind of understands that challenge at this table better than you. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how is the Payload SDK, how is that changing your business? And actually, how is that going to change how your customers use this technology?
Yeah, so we're a sensing and analytics company. We produce airborne sensors and a mix of downstream software. But when we got started about 5 years ago, we developed a platform on the sensor that allowed it to be agnostic to whatever drone you wanted to mount it to. And what was required to do that was integrating a navigation system into the sensor, integrating a GPS into the sensor, and basically it was a black box on board the aircraft. And it had the benefit of being able to be mounted to any drone, but there's a lot of double up of engineering going on into that sensor to enable that. Of course, the trade-off there is you're lacking some of the integration that can be achieved and some of the efficiencies that can be achieved when things are better integrated, namely access to the aircraft's navigation information. That saves up on space, on cost, and things like that. But more importantly, a tighter integration of the aircraft in our sensor systems while they're in flight enables data to be coming down to the operator while the system's flying. And that's really a game changer in a couple of respects. One, It allows the operator to see that the system's operating properly, basic health status type of information. But longer term, where this goes is the ability to begin pushing data down in real time to the operator or to another system in flight potentially. And so this tighter integration of our sensor systems with DJI aircraft is a huge step forward for us. And I think what we've witnessed over the last several years is that most of our customers are really gravitating towards DJI as a platform of choice. And that really comes down to reliability, the efficiency with which they can collect data, the ease of use. And I think the PSDK option with our new 3PX sensor is really going to enable that.
Yeah, and you that's a great point that you mentioned. You used to have to put in this GPS, like essentially building an entirely other flight controller for the sensor so it could get access to what's happening, in flight. And now you just can kind of piggyback off of the actual embedded sensors in the DJI hardware platforms, essentially allowing you to save more weight, be more efficient, and take advantage of that. So tell us briefly a little bit about, so you guys are launching this 3PX sensor, so the SLANTRANGE 3PX. What is this sensor? What makes it unique? And how are your customers using it?
So this builds on our prior generation 3P sensor, which is targeted for the agricultural community. And what this sensing system has been designed to do is to measure specific characteristics of growing agricultural crops that you cannot pick up from higher altitude systems like manned aircraft or satellites. What we found in the agricultural space is that all farmers are looking for data to improve the efficiency of their operations. And if you can deliver data to them more efficiently than they can do that by collecting it by walking around on the ground, there's a lot of interest in that type of application. But the data has to be trusted. So we've developed some proprietary and some patented technology around how data can be normalized for day-to-day use. So you don't get different results based on the time of day that's being operated, things like that. Second, the low altitude drone can really start characterizing crops in new ways. You can count individual plants. You can measure the size of individual plants. You can measure the size of fruit. You can start separating different plant types. And these are things that are much higher in value to agriculture than you can get from other platforms. So these are the basic capabilities that we've developed into our sensing and analytics package to date. But the 3PX builds on the third important piece of this, and that's into the efficiency of operations. So one of the things that happens occasionally is, one of our operators may launch a flight, and when they land, they find out, though, they didn't plan it properly and they didn't cover the ground they wanted to cover or something like that. Now they can visualize how that's happening real time in flight. There's no need to go back and repeat the flight or anything like that. And that really
FPV stream.
That's right. So, the real-time data that's coming down to the tablet that's in front of them, they can witness in real time what's happening on board that aircraft and know that they're getting the data that they need. And that all comes down to improving the efficiency of operations. And that, that coupling is what we've developed into the 3PX, built on the new Skyport technology that DJI has introduced here, is the ability to do that. And that really just makes things much more efficient. And that on top of the M200 platform as the most robust drone that's out there today, it's the ideal platform for large enterprise operations who really need to cover a lot of acreage.
So, Mike, you mentioned the DJI Skyport. Jan, going back to Jan with DJI, what is the Skyport exactly? That's like the interface, I take it, to kind of integrate the sensor into a variety of DJI platforms?
Right. So exactly that. So the Skyport is the PCB and the gimbal interface that you use to integrate your sensor.
Okay. And, this is a really cool moment for me, obviously. First episode, got three great companies here with me. But for you, this has got to be super exciting, too, from a DJI perspective. I mean, you guys are no stranger to this ecosystem strategy that you've been building since you kind of created that SDK on the launch of the Inspire 1 in 2015. Now you've got mobile SDK, guidance SDK, onboard SDK. Now you have the Payload SDK. So what is this? Can you just talk about a little bit about the ecosystem strategy that you guys have been working on and how this is going to play into the, where DJI is headed and what this kind of will enable for the entire industry as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to go back to the earlier point, we really see the Payload SDK is acting as an accelerator. Same way as when you first launched the mobile SDK, it enabled companies such as Drone Deploy to build applications on our platforms that really extended the functionality, right? And on board for things that the companies such as Automodality are working on to really build autonomous solutions. But we found that, the hardware piece was always a little bit difficult to square away. There's obviously a ton of potential to integrate any sensor that you can think of, but it's not feasible for us to do that across every single sensor, right? Or every single opportunity. And in many cases, there might be high value opportunities, but there isn't the market demand for us to justify a direct integration, right? Hence something like Payload SDK.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think everyone here has probably been in the drone space for a little while, but do you guys all remember like the Phantom 1?
Of course.
Yeah. So I would take it almost, like where the Phantom 1, the jump we'd had between like Phantom 1 to Phantom 2 and having like an integrated camera. The first thing that people did was like attach cameras to the Phantom 1.
Yeah, GoPro, right? Standard little mod.
To do that, essentially, like that's where we are today with the enterprise space, right? Like if you wanted to attach a sensor, like all the inefficiencies that Mike described, there's a lot of things that you really need to take on board and try to hammer out. But with Payload SDK, a lot of that complexity disappears.
So this is actually, I have a pet peeve, guys. I'm getting bored of just drones just taking pictures of things. I mean, it's been just like, that was the use case back when I really got into this back in like very early 2013. And there's so much more data to be collected and so many more ways that drones can be used. And so Randall, back to Randall with FLIR here, we chatted. You guys also have another sensor. I mean, this is like the cool stuff that like really gets me excited. It's like, okay, cameras and everything are great, especially multispectral technology like slant range. We've got Centera as well, who's launching the AGX 710 sensor, which is the double 4K for the Payload SDK. Tell us a little bit about some of the really unique, I wasn't even aware that FLIR was building anything besides thermal sensors.
Well, we are much more than thermal. Much more than thermal.
So tell us about the S900. I mean, what is this sensor? It's not the DJI S900, sure. The FLIR S900 sensor. The
FLIR Identifinder S900 is a radiation detection sensor that we're integrating into the PSDK. Now, this isn't something that we're doing for resale. It's something that we're doing as a test case to see what the PSDK can do. As we work through the negotiations with DJI to create the products like the XT and the XT2, there's a lot of back and forth, and that the engineering that's involved in that, bringing two companies together can take a lot of time. But we see, time is of the essence in the drone industry. As Jan mentioned, it's growing at a rapid rate, and thermal isn't everything for everyone, and neither is an RGB camera. So basically, we're taking this as an opportunity to test how easy these integrations are with other sensors, to be a part of that pioneering process with the PSDK. But we're excited to see what else comes out. As an accelerator for the commercial drone industry, we could find that there's sensors that are real game changers alongside of thermal that either FLIR has access to or another company has access to really drive the growth and the demand for the drone industry, and we all win in that case.
How is that S900 sensor used? Like, who's going to be purchasing this radiation detection?
So it's likely going to be law enforcement or public safety agencies that would use it. Like I said, this isn't something we're meaning for resale, but you could do vehicle inspections for radiation to see if there's any sort of dangerous things inside of a vehicle, or you could also do event monitoring. So if you have large gatherings of people, radiation is a possibility for dangerous things for large groups of people, and so it's one way that we feel could be useful. If you have blasts like happened in Japan a few years back, you could monitor those areas with an autonomous vehicle without having any person present.
And you also mentioned that you guys have laser methane detectors. So essentially being able to detect the presence of methane from a distance. Are there any plans potentially to integrate those into the PSDK? Or?
So I think that the demand from the market is really what's going to drive where we would put those R&D dollars or those efforts. I think that gas detection is a big deal when it comes to the drone space, but I think that also policy is going to push whether that would be useful. If you're doing pipeline inspections, not having beyond visual line of sight capabilities does make that a little bit more cumbersome. So I think as policy grows and as demand grows, we'll be interested in exploring all sorts of capabilities with what FLIR has to offer in their catalog.
Mm-hmm. Mike, moving back over to you. So there is a technical piece of integration to the PSDK. I mean, obviously you guys probably got advance notice about this as, a partner on this launch. And so can you tell us a little bit just about the technical piece of integrating the sensor? I mean, I myself am, I've built drones in the past. My first drone was powered by a DJI NASA MV2. I had to, tune the PIDs on the gimbal. So I know that when you stick something like a sensor that could be any size, could have different weight and balance characteristics, could, just be, oddly shaped. When you can't just stick it on a gimbal usually and then just have the gimbal work perfectly. So is there like a testing period that you had to go through for this integration, that you had to like tune the gimbal a little bit, or the DJI just like make it super easy and you can just throw like, I don't know, a super oddly weighted sensor on there, and then the gimbal completely compensates for that and then keeps it steady?
Yeah, so when we first, were given this opportunity to integrate our new sensor system on board, we were obviously excited, and we allocated engineers to the integration task and things like that. And then we got the first kit. We started doing the integration, and within a couple of, it was a very short period, our engineer came and said, it's done.
It's done.
It was actually very, very simple. I mean, there's a mechanical element to basically having a new connector where it's really cool. You just snap the sensor on, and if you want to change missions and do something else after a flight with our sensor, you just pop it off and pop on a new sensor in a matter of seconds. It's real simple, mechanically speaking. In our particular case, we don't use a gimbal. We don't need a gimbal for our options, so that part is simple.
Oh, nice.
And from a software point of view, it's basically just piping our data down to the ground. Yeah. There is something I wanted to add though. You were kind of talking about moving away from getting tired of pictures and things like that. But what I wanted to talk about is, where this is going. So we have one of our new large customers is one of the world's largest fresh fruit and produce suppliers. They've got operations in Latin America, Central Africa, and the Philippines. And they want to characterize individual plant development across these plantations in these really remote areas.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you do that, right? I mean, they don't want pictures. In fact, they're not even going to store pictures. They just want the process data on the back end. So there's a major element of analytics and processing that has to happen between when that sensor collects the data and when that data hits their network for whatever they're going to be doing with it downstream. What this PSDK element really starts bringing in is the ability for that processing piece to be compressed up into the aircraft, so that there is no on the ground into the cloud piece of processing anymore. And when you're talking about remote locations like Kenya and the Philippines, where there's very limited bandwidth, that's really an enabler to be able to push the processing power into the aircraft and just bring back the final results, which are much smaller in size than images that they don't want to keep in the first place.
So you're saying that that there's going to be some level of like pre-processing in flight on the actual aircraft itself as the data is collected?
There already is.
Okay.
And now it's a matter of can we take it to the completion step on board the aircraft? So what's coming down is what's the count of fruit in this particular block?
Oh, awesome. Okay.
And that's cool. But it's what's been opened up here is the possibility to do that.
This is the juicy stuff.
That's
all right. That's amazing. Okay. This episode of Commercial Drones FM is brought to you by FLIR. Pretty much everyone in the commercial drone world knows about FLIR's thermal imaging technologies and may even have a basic understanding of how their sensors work. At Commercial Drones FM, we think this technology is deserving of the spotlight to reveal some of the incredible things thermal imaging drones can accomplish.
Drones equipped with thermal imagers offer a way to see the world from a different perspective, which can help identify infrastructure problems, locate missing people, and increase safety and efficiency across a variety of industries. The value of thermal imaging for commercial drone operations is undeniable. So I want to use this podcast as a platform to dive deep into the world of heat and seek out the best practices and the unique use cases that make thermal imaging sensors the most drone-ready payload for commercial drone applications right next to RGB cameras. So join us over the coming months as we invite FLIR and their customers into our studio to discuss the technical and practical uses of their groundbreaking efforts in aerial thermal imagery. This episode of Commercial Drones FM is brought to you by Deveron UAS. Deveron UAS offers enterprise drone services for farmland across North America. I recently spoke with Bonduelle, one of Deveron's largest customers.
So my name is Jennifer Thompson. I work for Bonduelle America's Long Life. We're a vegetable processor. Bonduelle is a very large company with 54 plants in the world. Here in North America, we have 11 plants doing frozen and canned vegetables.
So naturally, I wanted to know, how is Deveron helping one of the largest vegetable processors in the world by using drone technology?
So we use Deveron to service and support our precision agricultural needs. For us, it's not easy to have our own or fly our own drones to gather crop data. So Deveron is ready and available to work for us when needed. We fly thousands of acres, and managing those acres, it just works very easily with them in our fast-paced growing season. They're not just providing data, they're helping to solve issues and find solutions.
Well, that's very important work, but what's your favorite crop to eat?
My favorite crop to eat is sweet corn. I will eat sweet corn 365 days of the year.
I'm not sure if I've ever eaten sweet corn yet that was monitored by drone. To learn more, visit deveronuas.com/dronesfm and see for yourself how Deveron is leading collaboration in agriculture with drones. That's deveronuas.com/dronesfm. Okay, back to the show. Jan, I got a question. So as an end user, so myself, if I am an organization, I'm interested in getting, the FLIR XT2, or maybe I'm interested in the SLANTRANGE sensor, or even the S900 potentially in the future if it's resold. What is this process like for me? Am I going to, if I already own an M200, am I going to have to buy a connector that what is it called again? The Skyport. Is that going to be included with the sensor? How is that going to work from a user perspective? How do I take advantage of this, basically?
Sure. So there's two stages to becoming a Payload SDK developer. First, you sign up on our website and you submit an application, and then we essentially register you as a developer. And as part of that, we send you some demo kits as well. So that gives you enough of the sample boards to be able to start prototyping. And then once that's completed, you can, when you're ready to go to manufacture and scale that up, we have a second stage of Payload SDK, which we call the manufacturing stage. So that's when we discuss a commercial relationship, and then you have access to purchase the boards to basically scale out your sensor platform.
Okay, cool. Is there a cost associated with? I mean, there's a developer kit, so I imagine there's nominal cost to get started.
Exactly.
With
this. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And so, we've got FLIR here. So, Randall, I did want to touch on going back to the ZenMuse XT2, the second iteration of the thermal sensor that's been available on DJI platforms. That is weatherproof. It's IP44, correct? What does that mean exactly? How weatherproof is that?
How weatherproof? I don't know how to measure that, but I think that it will give confidence to anyone that would be willing to fly their M200 in a mission. They'd be able to have the XT2 on board as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I saw the promo pics, and they're basically there's just droplets of water all over the drone, and because the M200 is also IP44 or 54 or something, ingress protection, resistance, what have you. So the two, I saw another two videos, some of the promo material. So there was a firefighting scenario video that shows this smoky room, and then with the RGB sensor, you can't see anything, and then it flips over. Since there's two cameras on this one sensor now, flips over to the thermal, and then you can see straight inside the room. You can see there's a person in there trying to escape. So
tell us a little bit more about how firefighting or public safety companies maybe are using these sensors, and just give us a little bit of a brief overview there.
Sure. So on the firefighting side, the reason that MSX or being able to switch back and forth is important is not all the data you want is just about the fire. It's about the location. It's about how many people you have there, and being able to monitor the scene. So you can capture a lot of imagery that would be useful for maybe investigations or also for insurance purposes while you're in the air, but also to make sure that the people that are fighting the fire are safe and also operating in the prescribed manner. So training, it's a big opportunity for fire departments to use these videos and this data for training purposes. Now, in public safety, probably the biggest use case is going to be for search and rescue. And search and rescue is not only done in the middle of the day in nicely lit areas, but also at night and in areas that might be harder to find. So when you can use a thermal signature from a person to locate them and be able to operate the drone 24/7, that's a big win for the public safety world. And then the MSX technology can give you more detail of the scene, what you're seeing within the image. And so if you're looking for a person, a thermal blob, let's say, might not have enough detail to know what it is. Is it a dog? Is it a hot rock, or is it a person? Where that MSX either can give you could switch over to the RGB and see what it is, or you can get that context within the blended imagery.
There was also a kind of like a solar panel video. I'm assuming you're using this for inspections as well as, I believe there was like a utilities inspection, like a power line coil kind of thing. What's happening there with these FLIR sensors? So
when you do have a defective element within the infrastructure of either solar field or utilities, you want to be able to identify where the issue needs to be addressed. So you can use the RGB side of the camera to take those imageries that would give you some sort of spatial awareness of where the error occurred, because a thermal image doesn't give you a lot of that context. So you could find serial numbers that are located on panels or on power poles to see where the issue is, and make sure that the technicians that go back can address it without putting a person in harm's way to inspect every single power pole.
Excellent. And so, this launch event, it's like, where do you rate this, Jan? Like from a DJI perspective, like, so for me, the Inspire 1, that was a huge leap forward. This has been talked about actually fairly recently, because the Inspire 1 turned 3 years old. People are still using it. Like Happy they're like, birthday. I am not upgrading. Like it turned 3 years old recently, and it's still being used in the field. Alongside of, the Inspire 1, that was a huge like leap forward for the industry. It's super sexy, but it was also like extremely capable platform with modular sensors. Alongside that, you did launch the first SDK. What was it? The mobile SDK?
Yes.
Okay. Where do you rate the Payload SDK in relation to that? Is that, are we seeing just like a different kind of prong being like growing out from DJI now that there's this Payload SDK?
That's a good question. I would see it as just a different growth vector, but to some extent, there's only so much that you can do with software. Of course, it opens up a lot of different areas, but there are also limitations, and we just kept on coming back to this point of hardware being the limitation. And we can make the best drone, if we're limiting what people can actually do with it, it's still just going to hold us back, right? And today we spent a lot of time just talking about different sensors that you can potentially attach, but there's also like really small, sort of low. I guess I would just describe it as like more lower level applications. So one specific one, it was just to attach a spotlight. So Randall, to your situation with the search and rescue, right? If you're flying at night, you've got your thermal on, and you see a blob, you can't necessarily make it out, and like the MSX isn't helping enough, right? And then if you turn on to your RGB, it's still just going to be totally dark, right? But now you can integrate a spotlight on an M210 where you have the second gimbal port, and that's going to point exactly where your camera's pointing, right? Now, these are kind of just the basic applications that we've sort of come across, but there's so much more. There's like laser pointers that we've seen as well for spotting, for search and rescue as well. But I think we're just scratching the surface, frankly.
No, true that for sure. And so presumably then that spotlight could be hooked into the drone, and then you could control it from the transmitter, from the DJI transmitter, or from the app itself, like the DJI Go app. Yeah. Is this going to be DJI Go app, or is this the other
DJI Pilot?
DJI Pilot. Yeah. So you're going to be using DJI Pilot to pilot the drone for any Payload SDK compatible sensor.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you can integrate your own. Well, you can build your own application as well, right?
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, with the mobile SDK.
With the mobile SDK,
of course. Okay.
But as a default, you're not going to build your own application just for a laser pointer or for a spotlight. It doesn't make any sense. But on default, like with the default settings on the M210, the two gimbals are going to track and point in the same direction when they're flying, right? So it's just a very simple complement. And I don't think like we should ignore like these very basic applications. And to your point about like the Inspire One, like there's a whole modding community around the Inspire Ones for like
to keep it alive, like just in case DJI someday, drops support for it. I mean, I look at these things like cell phones personally. If you have a really great like brick cell phone that like the DJI Inspire One is literally like that Nokia brick phone that everyone had and played Snake on, and like they don't want to get rid of it. I mean, that was just like the game changer.
Another trend I think here is also to Mike's point. You guys have an onboard compute, right? As part of your sensor?
Yeah.
Right. So this is, we're seeing, we're going to see more and more applications where you're able to do onboard processing. And this really, we're starting to open up the opportunity to build intelligent edge applications, right? Where you can do a lot of processing on the edge and just push the data out to only where you need to. And that's also going to drive a lot more applications and efficiencies. So rather than the past where you had to push everything back to the cloud and the kind of delay that you have moving that data back and forth before you actually knew what you could do with it, now all that, we're just bringing that loop, shortening that loop, bringing it closer and closer to where the data is captured. And there's just a ton of efficiencies there, really.
So this uses the onboard hardware of the drone itself, right? So like the processor, because you guys have like Movidius chips and some of the, some high-end computer vision, very capable processors that are image processors on board the actual aircraft themselves, correct?
Yes, but the Payload SDK does not utilize that.
Okay.
So for what Mike's developed within their sensor, there's a compute, right?
That's right.
Or as an alternative, you can also use our manifolds.
Okay.
As a solution as well for
the manifold. That's right. Compute. That's the like add-on computer and you can just plug it on into the M200 series.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So that's really interesting because I wonder, FLIR, if you guys are going to be, doing some automated. That's highlight the person in the search and rescue mission or something like that.
Sure. So FLIR is not extremely strong on the software side, but we do have a machine vision company that we acquired last year, Point Grey, which does a lot of really high-end machine learning and machine vision. So it is something that we do have in our arsenal. We just need to find the demand. And again, the PSDK allows us to do that without having some of the constraints of go-to-market strategies being blended with another company. And to be honest, I think that this really gives some of the bright minds within the industry that don't have a NASDAQ trading symbol next to their company to be able to do big things in the drone world.
Yeah. So what do you think then, Randall? I mean, what's next for FLIR? Like, just give us an overview as we kind of wrap this up here. I mean, where are you guys heading next? This is a big launch for you guys. This compatibility, you're a sensor company by nature. So this opens up entirely new possibilities. What are the next steps for FLIR? Where are you guys headed? What can the commercial drone industry look forward to in the coming months after this launch?
Sure. So I think that we're looking here with the PSDK for inspiration to find what that next step is. We listen really closely to our customers' feedback. We try to be pretty active in the drone industry to get that feedback, and we'll basically follow the trail that they leave. We do know our capabilities as far as technology, but we also just don't know, where the industry is going to go with policy. So we're trying to put our hands in that as well to start shaping things. So where beyond visual line of sight and night flights are a possibility, we could do things like autonomous solar panel or solar farm inspection. We could do pipeline inspection. long-range utility inspection. So those are the things that we're looking forward to the industry to catch up with. You mentioned the Inspire 1, 3 years old. That airframe is still very viable as an industrial platform, even though that wasn't even its intention. And that's why DJI is such a great partner for FLIR, is that they were doing the right thing years ago. They're not playing catch up. And so we have a reliable platform. And now basically we're using that as a port for our payloads.
Mike, what about you guys at SLANTRANGE? What's next for SLANTRANGE? Where are you guys headed in the next 12 or so months? And really leveraging and pushing out this Payload SDK compatibility.
I think from the agricultural point of view, where we're focused, it's been pretty well established that a low altitude drone is capable of producing much more valuable information for agriculture than you can get from satellites or manned aircraft, like I mentioned before. But the problem has been, the constraint of growth has been really two things. One is regulatory, which we all know about, but the other is getting compute power out to the places where the data is collected, as Jan mentioned here a minute ago. So what we want to do is really, push that compute power anywhere it's needed, and so we can reach those places those agricultural regions that just don't have access to the cloud and things like that. Longer term, and what we're seeing more out of the FAA now is talk about beyond line of sight operations. And what we envision is some point in the future, maybe it's just a couple of years, maybe, I don't know, but where a drone can go out and operate for several hours completely autonomously, and that data is just coming back to an operations center completely processed. And that's what we're working to enable on our end from the sensing and analytics point of view.
Excellent. Jan, are you guys gonna? Oh,
one point on that.
Randall, go ahead.
Just not many people know this, but beyond visual line of sight waivers, there's been 1,400 applicants. There's only 14 that have been given out, and FLIR has one of those. So as we open ourselves up to partnerships in that regard too, to work to enable drone either manufacturers, software providers, or solution providers to get that beyond visual line of sight waiver as well. So best practices are open for sharing for the partners in the drone industry.
What was the metric on that again? That was how many?
1,400 applications and 14. This was announced 2 weeks ago at the FAA symposium. We were 14 of the 1,400. And this is for our Black Hornet, small nano drone, about the size of your hand, for reconnaissance missions and things like that. But we have went through that process as a company, and we do have some best practices to share for those looking to do that.
Yeah, how could people get like that information on the?
Well, I think it's more of like a personal one-on-one type sharing. There's nowhere online.
You can find Randall and
you can look at our waiver.
Get it out of him.
No, it's not me. It's actually our Prox Dynamics team based in Norway, but I would be willing to help arrange that as well.
Prox. Okay, cool. So that was the one where you see the promo video of the little tiny drone landing in the hand.
Exactly.
So you guys acquired them. Okay.
Exactly.
When did you guys, do you know when you acquired them?
I think it was late 2016. So it would have been like November 2016, something like that.
Really interesting. Yeah. I used to have one of those little helicopter single rotor drones that I could land in my hand, but I couldn't sell it for the price that they're asking from the.
Well, they have a couple sensors on there and stipulations behind it as far as
it's a smart little capable platform. I'm really interested to see smaller and smaller drones. I mean, of course, you guys at DJI, you guys released the DJI
Mavic Air.
Mavic Air, that's right. Things are getting smaller. They're getting more capable. What drones are what platforms is the PSDK compatible with? Is it
with the M200 series?
M200. Okay. So no Inspire 2, no Inspire 1. Gotcha. Okay. No problem.
So the M210 specifically is our go-to developer platform for any sort of industrial and developer applications.
Mm-hmm. And so the same question to you, Jan, that I just asked at Randall and Mike. Where are you guys headed next? I mean, DJI is a busy company. You guys are launching products. I mean, I think the average cycle of new things that you guys launch must be 2 to 3 months at this point. I mean, you're expanding, you're getting into SDK and development and enterprise and consumer and smaller drones, hardware. You own Hasselblad, or at least the majority stake in the company, and others. What's happening next? Where are you guys going after this Payload SDK? What can you share?
I think fundamentally, like, I would just like to close with this thought. Like, we will, DJI's strategy is really to continually invest in our platforms and to evolve our platforms to the point where it is the default for any application development. And I think where we are in the industry today is, maybe we can draw an analogy with where PCs were maybe 20, 30 years ago. Since we're here in the Valley, like, back in the days, like when I was a kid, I used to build my own PCs. So, there's still like a homebrew kind of element. And I think in the past, when you had to build, Mike, when you're integrating your sensors, there's a lot of homebrewing that you had to do to make it work, right? And now a lot of that is just we're starting to move past that. And I wonder if in the future, the way like it's rare that we would talk about like your computer or my computer, but we talk about the apps or the solutions that we use on our compute instead. And I think we're going to see that same trend with drones as well. It's really just a flying computer, and it's a key piece that you can build solutions on top of.
So there we go. So one last question for all of you guys. This is a tough one. Whoever has the first answer, feel free to just speak out. But what do you feel personally, or, just relating to the drone industry as a whole, not like your own company, but like for the furtherance of drone technology to be developed by larger and larger companies and spread in a very, responsible way? What is the biggest challenge holding drones back right now? And the beyond visual line of sight, I think that is one of them. I think a lot of people imagine, the future is drones that just sit there and then take off whenever. But I mean, any other thoughts on like big challenges right now?
I'll jump in one. The regulatory thing we talk about all the time, but I think whenever we demonstrate our technology to somebody, they're shocked by how easy it is to operate the drone. There's a trepidation about getting involved in terms of, oh, I got to get trained as a pilot. We don't want to do all that stuff. And then we go out and you hit one button on a tablet screen. It takes off. It flies its mission. It comes back and lands right where it took off. It's so simple.
Yeah, and we talk about all these technical terms and all this jargon, but really when it comes down to it, honestly, this is my aviation side. It's a good thing. It's boring. It's boring to fly a drone these days for commercial purposes, and it should be, because you want it to be safe and repeatable and consistent. Does anyone else agree with that? Because I'm getting some interesting looks here. But
that's a great thing. But what we find is that one of the obstacles is that they think it's difficult, and it's not until they see it in action that they realize how easy it is.
Yeah. And when I say boring, I mean when you press the one button and the drone flies up.
It is boring.
The first couple of times you see it, you're like, wow, that's amazing. It's so cool. It's flying and doing all this stuff. But then eventually, after you got like 5-10 flights under your belt and you're doing this, it becomes a job. It's work. You're getting paid for it. You should love your work, by the way, be passionate about it. But yeah, the boring factor is great. Like, I always wish everyone has an uneventful flight whenever they're, flying across overseas or whatever.
And always maintaining line of sight, of course.
Yes, absolutely. So always maintain line of sight, guys and gals. So any other challenges?
Yeah. So to that point, I think that the awareness factor is a big deal. And like the homebrew point, we're getting a lot of the drone enthusiasts that are seeing this technology. When you go visit a large enterprise that is using drones, first of all, they're not sharing that publicly for the most part. They're keeping it under wraps, which makes it so that the public doesn't realize that large companies are engaging with this technology. But also, there's not a lot of that cross information sharing with finance departments, legal departments, the guy that mops the floor at the end of the night. Everyone should be seeing this technology if you're using it, not just the enthusiasts, not just those involved directly.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. Like, I would second that. There's a lot of organizations that we speak to that have really substantial drone operations, but they don't necessarily want to talk about it publicly.
Right. Competitive advantage is a big deal to keep that in, but for the drone industry, we're starving for big stories to come out to say, we're getting a lot more of these public safety lives being saved things, which are fantastic. But what about the inspections that are, saving thousands of hours a year for companies, or, millions of dollars in some cases? Where are those stories from big companies? And we know they're out there. They're just not being shared freely. And so I think that as a challenge, it is that drones are no longer a taboo thing, no longer a toy thing. It's a real game-changing technology, and people really start to embrace that.
Yeah. And it's still really with Part 107, we're in 2 years, right? Even less.
Not even.
So, and we're working with organizations that have fleets of 300 to 500 drones with trained operators, large scale fleets. And if we had to point out one challenge for them, it's really figuring out how they manage all those pilots, what their operational standards are. And, from the DJI side, we're trying to build tools like Flight Hub that help them scale that out. But if I have to point to one specific challenge, one would be definitely it would be great if a lot of these companies just come out and really showcase the great work that they're doing, because it just moved the whole industry forward. But the second would just be the operational side, those standards are still evolving. And frankly, if more people came forward to talk about how they're deploying their fleets, it would actually just help everyone.
There's a challenge that's been set out now for all drone companies. Go ahead and throw the logos out there. See if you can get permission from your clients to talk about how these companies are using the drones, because that is a great point. Everyone always talks about the regulations. I was leading in on the question, Mike, with regulatory questions or possibilities of holding things back, but. Yeah, I guess the public education piece, and Jan, to your point, I mean, this is something that me coming from a manned aviation background, being in corporate aviation, working with large Fortune 500 flight departments for years and flying helicopters, is that I kind of predicted that the drone industry was going, it's aviation, it's FAA regulated, of course. But, the drone industry is going more and more towards those corporate flight departments who are managing large fleets of drones. We're not talking 5 or 10 drones now. We're talking hundreds of drones. And that's happening actively around the US and around the world. So this is a good thing, and it just underscores the need for that operational excellence and safety, accountability, et cetera. So does anyone have any last parting thoughts? I don't know how to close an episode when it's me and 3 other people. I'm just, this is brand new to me. So normally I just kind of wrap it up here, but any last words, gentlemen?
I think you did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We should do more of these conversational podcasts. I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah. Get some more information out there.
Yeah, and spreading awareness is exactly why we're here. Spread awareness of what our products or our efforts in the drone industry are doing. But again, once it goes to a larger industry where we're talking about what are we doing in the oil and gas or utilities, that's really where we need that fourth voice in the room that's going to be from the actual industries that are being impacted.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, everybody, congratulations on a very cool launch. Today we had Jan Gasparich, who's the head of enterprise partnerships for DJI. We had Mike Ritter, the CEO of SLANTRANGE, and then of course Randall Warness, the global SUAS segment leader at FLIR. So yeah, congrats on the awesome Payload SDK launch. Really looking forward to see what other companies do and integrate with this technology and how the actual end users implement it. While you are at your computer or on your phone, you can go ahead and look up the podcast on iTunes or wherever the heck you listen to pod. It's everywhere. It's on Spotify. You can subscribe there, leave a review. It helps. Follow me on Twitter at Drones Podcast or Facebook.com/Drones Podcast to stay up with the latest news, and just stay tuned for more episodes of Commercial Drones FM. We are now going to cut off the mics, everyone. So bye-bye.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.